Hello, everyone. Welcome to the Horror Room. I'm Travis Bruce, and today I have a special guest with us. He is an author, and he has a book out right now. It's called Monomania, and he also has one that's coming out Valentine's Day, and it is called Next of Kin. I have with us coming all the way from the UK. I have Elton Skelter. Elton, welcome to the Horror Room.
Thank you so much for having me. It's such a pleasure to be here.
It's a pleasure having you, man. It's a pleasure having you. So, so first off, tell us a little bit about Monomania.
Wow. That was a little experiment I was doing. I started dabbling with self-publishing last year when I released a short collection of short stories as a self-published book, and then I released Monomania um, just before Christmas. Um, and it was something a bit different for me. I usually go for sort of very heartfelt, emotional kind of horror books, but this one was very much a fun hack and slash kind of slasher based ode to the genre of slashers. Um, and it was just good fun to write. Usually I find a lot of my work is quite emotionally draining. This one was just a bit more fun, and essentially it's a love letter to the slasher movies of the 90s.
I love it. And so what made you decide? You know what? I'm gonna try something fun out this time.
I think having released my first book, which was called Life Support, which was a very emotionally devastating book. It took me over a year to write it. It changed multiple times throughout the process of it. Um, I just wanted something that I could enjoy, that wasn't too emotionally taxing. And being a millennial who grew up in the 90s on films like Scream and I Know What You Did Last Summer and Urban Legend, I kind of wanted to pay tribute to that sort of resurgence of slasher movies that came about when I was sort of becoming a horror fan at a young age. And yeah, it turned out to be quite an interesting experiment because it was the first time I'd ever written anything in third person. It had a huge cast of characters, and so it couldn't be written from a first person perspective. Even though there was central main character, it was a really interesting experiment for me to test my limits as a writer, to see if I could pull it off writing in the third person. And I'm quite proud of what happened. And then Amazon happened. Um, and I am no longer allowed to publish books on Amazon after Monomania. So
Wow.
yeah, yeah, I'm not sure what I did. They don't have to tell me. It's in the terms and conditions. But apparently, I did something bad, and they've given me a lifetime ban from publishing on KDP. So if that's not enough of a reason to look up the book, then
Yes. Now, and I understand there's a huge cast in Monomania, but was it hard as a writer not to put yourself into some of the characters?
I think I initially intended it to have a central character, and it's a character that we follow from the very beginning of the story right through to the end, nearly. And and so a lot of me exists in that because he's the character that I see most of myself in. He's a queer character. He is very unsure of himself. He's very sort of insular. He lives a very, very sheltered life. It's very much like me. I'm not crazy, but I put a bit of myself into that character. But then when I was building the cast of characters out from there, it became important to me to reference some of the films that shaped me as a horror enthusiast throughout. So there's a character um, who's recovered from being stalked by a white masked man who stalks the babysitters, and there's a girl who was stalked in her high school by somebody that she was very, very close to in reference to Scream. And I wanted to sort of let people reading it see the kind of things that we saw when we were growing up in movies and TV shows. And I wanted to represent everyone. So there's a huge diverse cast of characters. There are queer people, there are racially diverse people, there are neurodivergent people, and people of all genders across it, which was important for me to do because I wanted everyone who I grew up with who's reading this book to see themselves in this book. Um, I think I got there. I think I did an okay job of representation, but that's something that I look for in all of my projects is making sure that I represent as many people as possible.
And that's funny that you bring that up. I've had a couple conversations recently with authors and also horror filmmakers. I grew up. I was born and grew up in the '80s, and 80s, the golden age for horror films. And the horror films were definitely more diverse back then. Like
Yeah,
I mean, you got to see bigger people, disabled people,
yeah,
queer, black, Indian, Asian. Like it was a diverse. Jason, Michael Myers, Freddy Krueger didn't care. They killed everybody.
yeah,
Everybody was represented. Everybody they died. But if you notice now in modern horror, it is a it's a cookie cutter cast, and it's
yeah.
not that diverse. And
It's definitely gone backwards. Yeah, and
yes,
I think
everybody is Caucasian and super attractive.
yeah. I mean, if you look at the first Scream movie, even that was 1996, there isn't a racially diverse character in that movie at all. Um, as they progress, as we go into sort of a new age of horror, it is becoming more diverse again. But it's amazing to look back on the things in the 80s, particularly like you say, Nightmare on Elm Street 2 was queer coded to the walls.
Yes.
The central character in that was a representation of, they never actually explicitly said it, but he was a representation of a queer person at the time. And then you've got like amazing films like Candyman that showed a black character in the central stage, and no one seemed to have a problem with it. And then we reached this sort of early 2000s point, and everything became violently political, and
Yes.
everything seemed to shrink in on itself. And I think that's when things stopped being inclusive for people who just wanted to have a good time and see themselves on the screen or in books. And undoing that now is liberating. It's a lovely way to just to look back and say, you know what, we used to have this, we could have this again, and screw anybody who doesn't want it.
Exactly. And we should have, disabled characters in horror movies. I mean,
Yeah,
look at you look at Dream Warriors, Nightmare on Street 3. You look at
yeah,
Texas Chainsaw Massacre. You look at, the Friday 13th. It's always had a disabled character as well
yeah,
in the movie. And like that's something it's like, you watch a Scream 6 and you don't see and they're at Columbia University, which is a huge
yeah.
college, and it's not one disabled person walking I mean, in a wheelchair or I mean it's like odd.
Yeah, that's what you get when you have a film that's led and created by a bunch of cis heterosexual white men. Um, Making a film, you lose the possibility of having sort of a fully diverse cast. I mean, I was impressed with the new Screams and the way that they brought in central Latino characters and mixed race
Yes.
characters as their core four, and I loved that. I thought, I remember watching Scream 5 and thinking, you know what, this could be the film that Scream should have been.
Mhm.
This shows the representation. It shows everything. Mindy was a queer character. It was wonderful, and then, like you say, it's still not there. It's
No,
missing incredibly important parts of the population represented in horror. It is coming in the right way, but it's
yes,
not there
yeah,
yet.
exactly, yeah. Because I mean, at the end of the day, horror is supposed to be diverse, which means that anybody can die. So
Yeah,
you just want to harp on everybody's fear that
yeah,
no matter what race you are, sexual orientation, whatever, there's a possibility that you can get killed, and that's an
absolutely.
amazing thing,
Yeah. And
Uh, uh,
I think that's one of the sort of the testaments, particularly to, like, say, the Nightmare on Elm Street franchise, was that Freddy was non-discerning. He would go after everyone. Everyone was a
everyone,
target, to the extent that Nancy bit it in the third movie. It's she was supposed to be the final girl. The final girl's not even safe. So
exactly. Now, and being a queer writer, what are some struggles that horror writer? Well, what are some struggles that you ran into?
to be honest, it's been incredibly easy for me because of the people who've paved the way.
Like,
I'm lucky enough to be existing in a time where there are presses designated to supporting and uplifting queer voices, and they are constantly evolving and they're constantly coming forward. I have a book out in just over a month with Lethe Press, which is one of the oldest queer-owned independent presses in the country or in the world. It's been around for nearly 23 years now, owned by a single gay person who does all the work, Steve Berman. He's an absolute inspiration to me. And people like him who've come before and who have laid down their voices, and even the people now who are emerging. We've got the big names like Chuck Tingle, and we've got Eric LaRocca, who are coming forward and really bringing forward horror to the masses with their work, and becoming well known and getting signed on to bigger publishers. It's encouraging a new generation of queer writers to come forward and say, you know what, I've got stories and I can tell these stories. So we are getting an incredible resurgence of queer literature coming from the horror genre and the speculative fiction and transgressive fiction horror. And just the names coming out of it are insanely talented. You've got people like Ray Knowles and Emma Murray just arriving on the scene, representing the queer people from all across the queer spectrum. And it's really encouraging to see that. So for me personally, I have no problems at all. I've not encountered anything. I'm not very popular. I'm still very new at this. I've only been doing it for a couple of years, but I've not met any issues because of the incredible work that people before me have put into doing this.
Do you think, and I could be wrong, but do you think we'll ever see a queer iconic horror character, whether it be in writing or in films?
I think we already have. I mean, Clive Barker is writing essentially queer coded characters, has been since the 80s. So I think horror is one of those genres that lends itself to differences, to being the other and being the outcast. And I think that's what invites a lot of us in, is the fact that we see ourselves as maybe not, the person who can just walk through life and be safe all the time, and the lack of safety that you feel as a queer person, particularly in the current political climate. And it draws us to it. It's like a magnet. And so it's an inviting place to be as a queer creator. It's not the sole reason why I write in the horror genre, but it is a great place to be because it is inclusive, and it is it doesn't discount your life experiences. It doesn't, it's not going to count you out just because of who you love or how you live your life. And I think it draws people in for that very reason.
Amazing. That's amazing. Now, you have your next project that's going to be coming out Valentine's Day, and that's called Next of Kin. Tell us a little bit about that.
That is an interesting book. That was my first book that I wrote. It's had an interesting journey as well. I wrote it off the back of the first time I got published as from a short story. And I was writing a lot of little bits and pieces here and there to try and find my voice, to try and find out what I wanted to do. And I wrote a short story called Cheese Knife, which is a terrible title. And but I really liked it because it allowed me to, within 2,000 words, to find a character that was an archetype from horror. It was essentially Patrick Bateman from American Psycho. And make him do something gay. it was a way for me to take a character that I love from literature and to evolve him into my own viewpoint. And it was an exercise at the time, but I found that I really loved that story. And so I had it out on submission a couple of places, and I withdrew it from everywhere. And I thought to myself, it's a bigger story. This guy is interesting. Now I've given him some kind of background that isn't necessarily the story that Bret Easton Ellis put out in American Psycho. Now he's got this different dimension to him. I want to know what he's going to do next. And I remember a long time ago, I used to want to write romance. Um, I was such a romantic back in the day before I lost all hope, and um, I I had this idea about a mix-up at a hospital where somebody who maybe doesn't have anyone as it gives them the name of somebody who just they have a card in their wallet and says, you know, this is my next of kin, not thinking that they're going to call them and say you have to come and take them home. Um, and then I thought, actually, what if the person that picked you up from the hospital wasn't a good person? What if the person that picked you up from the hospital was actually a murderer? Um, and then it kind of spiraled from there a little bit because it became a story about two people who are so intrinsically broken, who live their lives fine without each other. They're horrible lives, and they're having a terrible time, and they find each other, and for a brief moment in history, they find respite. They find each other, and they find a tiny bit of happiness. But based on who they are as people and how they come together and the effect they have on each other in their lives, they end up destroying each other. And it was a really interesting character piece to take these two characters who are very, very different, very diverse, and have their own individual motivations, and put them together and see how bad it could get. And it got really bad. So it became American Psycho meets Romeo and Juliet, in the fact that it was star-crossed, and it was never meant to happen. But we get to see it unfold, and we get to see these two people come into themselves and then fall apart on the page, and it's really interesting to do.
And it's funny that it's coming out on Valentine's Day too. I mean, was that a coincidence, or did you purposely?
No, I asked for that.
Okay.
I did that on purpose because the first time I tried to pitch it to a publisher, they told me it didn't have enough heart. They said it wasn't romantic enough for what they were looking for. And every subsequent time I went back to it, I thought, you know what? It's a terrible story. It's a horrible story about horrible people, but it's damn romantic. It's really, you know, it's Shakespearean in its horrendous romance. It's a tragedy of just epic proportions. So I thought, release it on Valentine's Day. Not everyone's going to want to be happy on Valentine's Day.
No.
You know, some of us are just out here single and getting by. And I thought, you know, this is the book for people who are just, you know, the anti-Valentine's book.
But there's people also who are not even single. They're in relationships and they're not happy on Valentine's Day. So it could definitely be for a lot of people.
It's a stupid holiday.
Yeah, it is. Yeah,
yeah, and it's met some good positive responses so far, even from people who are happy. So
yes. All right. So as you know, this is a horror channel. So I'm gonna ask you 3 random horror questions. You ready?
Mm-hmm.
Okay.
Okay.
So
yeah.
So growing up, you grew up in the '90s. So you were a Scream fan. But who was your favorite iconic horror character? Who was the first one who you locked in with, and you were like, I have some kind of connection with this horror character?
Oh, it's going to sound really bad, but Michael Myers has always been my guy. I've always been a huge diehard fan of the Halloween franchise, and I'm one of those very rare beasts who even like the remakes, the Rob Zombie remakes. I champion those because it's like, take Halloween and make it extreme horror. I love that, and so Michael Myers has always been that character for me. But it is only because of how the franchise progressed. I think if Halloween 1978 had been a standalone film, I don't know that I would have related as much, because his motivations of having Laurie be his sister, and that being the reason he was attracted back to her and he was going after her, that made the most sense for me. Without that, and taking Halloween 1978 on its own without that storyline in it, it all seems a little convenient or a little crazy. It doesn't seem to flow as well without the narrative of them being brother and sister. But and I think as well, it added a sort of emotional component to Michael that wasn't supposed to be there. but he was still pulling through. He would just go after his family, and gradually the franchise went on, and it gave it a curse, and there was some druids, but those first sort of first two movies especially, and the remakes especially, it gave that real psychological bent to it, but with a mysterious character who you didn't really know too much about, and I loved that. As soon as I saw 1978, I was in love with slashers, and it was the slasher that started it all. So that's my Michael Myers, my big character. I love him.
And yeah, it's still he's not my favorite character, but it's still the original Halloween is still my favorite horror movie of all time. It's the movie that really got me into horror, and it still has a place in my heart. There's some good sequels in there, and I don't mind the Rob Zombie ones, but I don't mind them as horror movies. But I'm just not a Rob Zombie movie fan. I mean, there's certain things about his writing style that turns me off about his movies, and but I mean, nothing pissed me off.
He's incredibly un-PC, and like all that conversation we were having about inclusiveness and stuff like that before, is sort of really bad sort of ableist speech and things like that. Like, there's a lot of stuff not to like about it. I think the thing that really attracted me to the remakes was Scout Taylor, who played Laurie.
Yes,
she had a really visceral reaction to what was happening, and her screams, her cries, her reactions, and then her subsequent breakdown because of it. The way it presented itself on screen had me relating to it more, because I think to myself, if I was in that situation, I would be in bits. Jamie Lee Curtis was far too classy and too composed for me at the time, and I thought, if I saw that man on the street and he was following me home and waving a 14-inch knife at me, I would be absolutely psychotic with just grief and fear and terror. And I think the just incredible screaming capabilities of Scout was just it really drew me into that, and so that gave me a resurgence of Halloween love in 2007 when that came out.
It's amazing. All right, let's go over to the second question. Okay, so you're a Scream fan. What is your favorite Scream movie? Is it the original, or is it one of the sequels?
Again, it's going to be a really stupid answer.
Okay.
It's Scream 4. I love Scream 4. I don't know why. It's not the best film. It was shot entirely in sort of a terrible filter over the camera, and it just looked fuzzy and weird. But Gail was just utilized perfectly in that film. It gave us Deputy Sheriff Judy, who became a quick fan favorite for me. And I think that despite the sort of the very early stages of Emma Roberts' career, she did Jill fantastically, and that family connection that brought it back to the reason that Sydney was in the middle of this in the first place, because of the problems of her family, because of the sins of the mother. And then it sort of also had the social commentary of the time of everybody wants to be famous, everybody needs to be famous for something, but they don't want to work for it. And it said a lot. And the performances were great, the kills were nasty. I loved it.
See, I'm a fan of all the Scream movies. I think it's the most consistent horror series around. It really is. Being 6 movies in. I get shit because I think I really liked Scream 6. I really, really liked Scream 6. Up until the last 15, 20 minutes. It was almost a perfect movie. It was almost a perfect Scream movie. Okay.
It killed it. It absolutely nailed it. It brought back Kirby as well. So that gave us all that gift.
I was watching that. I was like, oh my God, this is better than the original? And then the ending kind of but I really enjoy Scream 6.
Yeah, I was one of those unlucky people that accidentally saw the spoiler on TikTok about the reveal at the end before it happened. So I knew who it was going to be when I went in there, hoping that was like a dummy ending. It was not, and it was still really enjoyable. I watched it at midnight on the day of release in the theater, and I had a really good time. I watched
Yeah,
Scream 5 just before that in the theater, then Scream 6 straight afterwards, and yeah, it was a good time, and I thought it was handled really well, and I'm gutted that we're not going to see any more of Sam and Tara.
exactly. And I mean, I don't know why Scream 6 gets so much hate because I thought it was almost
No.
perfect Scream movie. I really do. I think it was almost a perfect.
Mm.
It's
It was
definitely
better than the fifth one, if you ask me.
yes,
And
it was definitely better
yeah,
than the fifth one. See, I wasn't a huge fan of the fifth one. I saw that in the theaters as well, and I wasn't that that much of a fan of the fifth one. But the sixth one, like, I mean, the I'm pretty sure everybody's seen it now, so I don't think I'm spoiling anything. But like the actual ghost face before you actually reveal who they are, this is a more ruthless ghost face. Like it was like
yeah.
all the rules were out at that point. This ghost face would run inside a convenience store and kill somebody. Like it was insane.
And the dummy start as well, where you had a Ghostface kill, and then he took his mask off, and then he ended up being the Ghostface kill later on, and it was just
That was the
clever. It
greatest.
did what Scream 4 wanted to do in a sort of meta way, but it made it more intrinsic to the story. It made it more important, and it showed you what you were about to expect. The only thing I didn't like was Samara Weaving using her own accent. I wasn't ready for that.
No.
I was like, oh my god, she's Australian. That sounds terrible.
All right, final question.
Okay.
Okay. Is there a project that you have shelved somewhere that you've written and the reason why it's shelved is because you don't think the world is ready for it?
Yes. Um, I've been toying with this idea for a while now, and I think finding my place at Lethe Press, and being so nurtured by Steve for the release of Next of Kin, I think I've found a place where I can trust this story, and it's really out there. It's probably weirder than anything that I've written before. Very metaphysical. It doesn't make sense to not write it. It's lived in my head rent free for maybe 12 years now, and now's the time to sort of put it together. So I've got an outline, and I've got character ideas in my head. I see scenes like their movies, and it's ready to come out. So this one shelved idea, this untitled as yet shelved idea, is something that I do plan to work on this year, and hopefully finish this year to submit to Lethe. So watch the space. It's it's going to be interesting.
I'm looking forward to it. Definitely look forward. Now, Elton, where can everyone find you, my friend?
I am nowhere and everywhere. I tend to check out Twitter X occasionally, but it's got very toxic lately, so I'm skipping past that one. So I hang out a bit more at Instagram, and lately I found myself back on Facebook,
I love Facebook.
almost exclusively, because despite its shortcomings and its ownership, it actually has some incredible groups. The
It really
Books
does.
of Horror groups, I found some amazing support in those ones. The Books of Horror Freeview, I found a lot of reviewers who I've become really close to and who've really appreciate my work and who I will ask for feedback. I kind of feel safest there. It's nice, despite what it is.
Yeah.
And I am on TikTok, but I think I'm too old for it. So I chuck up a little video of a book cover every now and then with a bit of a track on the back. But I don't think I'm ever going to be one of those people that's throwing shapes on TikTok. So yeah.
It's
Other than that, though, I am also one of the co-hosts of the Cutthroat Queens podcast. So we've got our own podcast that we do, which is based on indie horror and mainly writers and artists. And yeah, I don't do so much on screen stuff for that. I do most of the editing and help them do the planning and stuff. But that's a fun little experience as well. So yeah, that's where I'm
amazing.
at.
Awesome. Awesome. By the way, what you're saying is absolutely true. And maybe it's because I'm 41 years old, but like when I first started channel, everybody said, "Oh my goodness, you got to have the big three. You got to have Facebook, Instagram, TikTok, right?" And I don't know anything about Instagram. I don't know anything about TikTok. I'm a Facebook guy. I've been doing Facebook for years. So I
Yeah.
had to incorporate that in because I kept hearing it. But I get most of my following from Facebook. I really do. I get most of my support and
Yeah.
my following from Facebook. Instagram might come in second place. TikTok, I don't use TikTok. I don't know. I don't get what TikTok. I don't. And maybe because I'm old, I don't get what the hype is with TikTok. So I tried posting videos on it and it looked ridiculous. And I wasn't getting no likes. I'm like, okay. So I kind of abandoned my TikTok, but who knows? We'll see what happens.
If I feel like it's got like an unlimited power at the moment, like it has the ability to make or break an author's career. There's been so much drama stirred up from the indie horror community on TikTok, and some people have met the bad side of the blade, and some people have been holding the knife, and it seems like a place that you could really benefit from if you're brave enough to walk through that haunted house.
I look at
I'm
my
not
age
always that
demographic.
brave, so most of my stuff is I'll post a picture.
Yeah. I look at my age
I I
on
think
YouTube.
yeah, I think
I'm so good.
oh, carry on. Sorry,
Oh no, I'm about to say I look at my age
I was just
demographic
going to say
and
it's
watching
the
stuff.
Sorry, I think we're getting lagged.
Yes, you good.
I'm going to wait for you. You go first.
Okay. No, but I was saying on YouTube it gives you the option to look. You can see who is you know, like the age breakdown on who's looking at your channel, and my age range is between 35 and 50. Right, so like I don't think that is the TikTok group. So
No,
that's why I
no.
don't promote on TikTok. TikTok is for people in their 20s and teenagers. So I don't really promote
Yeah,
on TikTok.
yeah. I think we've just missed that age where we could actually get something valuable from TikTok, and
Yeah,
there are people making entire careers on it. I think we just missed that. So we'll just stick out on Facebook and complain about the younger generation. Be
exactly,
bitter millennials.
exactly. And that's I mean that's where all of the millennials we hang out on Facebook, and then I feel like whatever's group comes after that, they're Instagram, and then the kids are TikTok. But
Yeah,
yeah,
there's a definite divide.
it is. It is. All right. Well, Elton, it's been a pleasure having you on, my friend. I look forward to seeing some of your future products. And you're more than welcome to come back on in the
Thank you.
future.
I would love
All
to.
right.
Thank you so much for having me. It's been an absolute pleasure talking to you.
You as well. You as well. All right, everyone. Well, thank you for coming on the Horror Room. I'm Travis Bruce. I'll see you guys next time. Take care.